Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint podcast. Today's guest is Josh Evans, a number one best-selling author, TEDx curator, and globally recognized keynote speaker on purpose-driven leadership. Josh has spent over 15 years studying workplace behavior and has been featured in Harvard Business Review, The Wall Street Journal, and Inc. His mission is simple yet powerful. Help leaders build phenomenal cultures, eliminate toxic environments, and bring deeper purpose back into the workplace. If you care about performance, culture, and meeting at work, this conversation is for you. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our honor, my friend. Now, Josh, at a very high level, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about you in the company for the first time?
Absolutely. I think a lot of leaders realize that their team members are feeling a level of uncertainty in the modern world that has never before been experienced. And I think that's causing a lot of their people to become burnout and unfulfilled and lost. And I think that that's a problem because it directly affects their bottom line. It directly affects the longevity of the team members that they have, and it affects their productivity. And so what I like to help people realize is that people aren't starved for better work. They're starved for meaning in the work that they're already doing. And so I think a lot of people make I'll say it's the mistake of having a job that they don't necessarily like. And so they look for the next job because they hate this job and they're not fulfilled in that job. And then they go to the next job and it turns out after 6 months, they start to hate that job and they're not fulfilled in that job. And I think the biggest problem is most leaders today don't know that it's their job to help their team members derive meaning and fulfillment from their work. And I think that comes through understanding that we all have a deep purpose behind the work that we're doing, no matter what the job is, no matter how menial the task seems.
I love how you put the responsibility on leaders to ensure that the workforce and the work staff has meaning in their work. I was going to ask you a question, but it was more so on the personal level. How would someone, again, at an individual level, start to find meaning in their work? Because earlier, I used to suffer from that as well. I would bounce from job to job, unfulfilled, thinking the next job is going to be, the magic sauce, one might say. But really, it's almost as if I'm a little unhappy with myself. From, again, an individual standpoint, what are some tips, tricks, and pointers you would give to that person to help them find meaning in their work? Or at least some more self-love, one might say.
That's a great question. So I think as individuals, we're really good about describing what our role is, right? So we know what our role is. It's our title. It's in our email signature. It's in our LinkedIn profile. It's on your business card if you still have one of those. But to be honest, knowing what my role is very shallow and it's not compelling to the deep human need or the deep human desire to have meaning in our work. We're also really good about knowing what somebody in our role does, right? It's the tasks, the functions, the responsibilities, right? The KPIs that we're judged against once a year or quarterly if you're lucky. But once again, that list of to-dos still falls short of compelling. And what I think we need to improve is our ability to remember what doing great work actually means to all those that depend on us. So if you'll allow me a story for a minute, as you know, I travel a lot for work. And one day I was in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm headed to New York City the next morning for another event. And so I had to schedule an Uber to pick me up at 4 a.m. at the Days Inn in Tucson. And so I'm sitting out there to the Days Inn, holding my suitcase, waiting for this sedan to roll up, and up rolls this Uber. And she rolls down her window, and we do that little dance that you do with an Uber to make sure you're getting in the right car, because I've gotten in the wrong car before. And I go, "Are you Gabriella?" And she's like, "Yes." "Are you Joshua?" And I was like, "I sure am." She goes, "Get in." And then I said, "Hey, can I get in the front seat?" Now, look, I know that's like totally taboo, and everyone's like, "What's wrong with this guy?" But I like to study the human condition, and I have a captive audience for a half hour on the way to the airport. So I find out what makes this woman tick. So I get in Gabriella's car, and off we whisk towards the airport. Now, as everybody knows, people that are driving for Uber, they're not doing it as a vocation, right? They weren't called to do it. They're doing it as a side hustle, right? To like get money to pay for some passion project or to cover a vacation or to make ends meet. And that's very respectable. So I'm always curious what they do when they're not driving for Uber. So I started this conversation with Gabriella, when you're not driving for Uber, what do you do? And she goes, "Oh, I actually manage an upscale restaurant here in the Tucson area." And I go, "That must be so fulfilling." And she goes, "No, it's not." Just ruined my line of questioning. So I'm sitting there like in the front seat, like I'm a moron. Why would I sit in the front seat? Why couldn't you just be normal this time, sit in the back and be quiet? But she must have known something was up, because then she said something I've never heard an Uber driver say. She said, "Actually, what I'm really passionate about is driving for Uber." I think, well, hold on, time out. Like, I've never heard an Uber driver say this. I've heard an Uber driver say, "I like the flexibility." I've heard them say, "I like the pay." I've heard them say, "Please don't throw up in the back." But I've never heard an Uber driver say, "I'm passionate about driving for Uber." And so I dive in and say, why? And it turns out she only drives from midnight to 6 a.m. because, and I quote, "That's when people need help getting home the most." And it was amazing. She went on to tell me how she would go down to the bar district next to the university in Tucson. And if she saw somebody that shouldn't be driving, she would offer them rides home without a fare just to make sure they made it home safely. And so we've heard people be like, I would do my job even if they didn't pay me. But this woman is actually doing that. And so I dug in deeper. So, okay, why is this your passion project? It's an amazing thing to be doing. Why is this your passion project? She told me that she had lost a sister to a drunk driving accident 2 years before this, and she didn't want anyone else to go through that same pain. So she goes out every night and she helps people get home safely. Now, here's the interesting thing. She has a deep passion for helping people arrive home safely, right? Getting a ride when they need one. And it's an unbelievable idea if you think about it in a deeper perspective, because every Uber driver has the same job, right? It's taxi service. That's what their role is. And everybody knows what an Uber driver does, right? They accept a fare, they pick up the fare, they drive the fare, drop off the fare, and then accept the next fare. Both of those are those two shallow into the pool, what their job is and what somebody in that job does. Now, where Gabriella is different from every other Uber driver I've ever met is she knows what doing a great job as an Uber driver means to the individual sitting in the back seat, or in my case, the front seat of her car. She knows that it means that this individual has peace of mind. They're going to arrive at their destination safely. Now, Gabriella is doing the exact same job as every other Uber driver out there, right? She's picking up fares. She's hopefully getting, 5 stars. That she's doing the exact same work, but she derives so much more fulfillment because she has the wherewithal to understand that it's not necessarily about just dropping the person off. It's what she's really providing to that person, what it really means to that individual. And I think if more people can realize the impact of their work to the individuals that depend on them, whether it's their coworkers, their family, their customers, their communities, it allows us to move towards meaning. And so that we can actually derive fulfillment from the work that we're doing because we see the impact.
That's such an inspiring story because I am obsessed with personal development. And as I zoom out, I realize we have such a big part in society, in the world, within the company. But because we view the world, we view our position from this very, very narrow lens, it's hard to see that sometimes. I always say that the work that you do today will help somebody out that you haven't even met yet. And I find that to be just so inspiring, like you said. How does someone take a step back and realize that? Because they're caught up in their day to day, the career that might be unfulfilling, maybe their boss doesn't like them, family problems at home. I guess as if you are speaking to a leader, what are some things that they can do for one to help themselves step back and realize I'm actually like we are on a mission, and what we're doing here is extremely valuable and extremely important to not only the company but to society as a whole. How can we instill that belief into our employees and into our staff?
I think it starts because any work worth doing, right? At the end of the day, you're solving a problem for someone else. You're providing somebody else with peace of mind, right? Like, we'll take another example, right? A pizza delivery driver. It's an easy job, right? It's not the most fulfilling. It's definitely not the most rewarding. But what they are really doing, right? When a pizza guy shows up at my house and my kids are excited because pizza's arriving, what that person is really providing, they're providing me with the opportunity to spend an extra half hour with my family instead of cooking dinner, right? They're providing us with the opportunity to commune commonly around a table, to take joy in sharing a meal together. What that pizza delivery driver is really, really impacting is the cohesiveness of my family. And that's a huge impact. And the problem is they don't get to see that, right? You drop off the pizza, the door shuts, they count their tip, get back in their car, and then go pick up the next pie. What they don't see is as I shut that door, I go, pizza's here. My kids are excited. Everybody got the type of pizza they want. And then we sit and have a meal together. And that pizza driver is creating that moment for my family. And too often we are removed from that impact, right? We have blinders on and we have all these tasks we have to accomplish. We don't have the luxury of time to look up from those tasks and see the bigger picture, what we're really impacting. And that's, I think, the job of a lot of leaders is you got to grab your employees by the scruff of the neck, pull them and be like, look, this is the impact you're making on the world. This is the impact you're making on our team. This is the impact that all of our customers feel. And once you see that, all of a sudden, the small tasks don't seem so menial, right? The small challenges that interrupt your day don't seem that big because you have something larger that you're working towards. And I think that's what most leaders need to do is take that step back, write down what your role is, what somebody in your role does, but then really dive deep into what doing great work means, what it means to your team that you're supporting, what it means to your company, what it means to your customers, your community, and then also what it means to your family that you're able to provide for them as well. And once you get that deep, all of a sudden that role has a lot more intrinsic value to it as an individual, and you realize that impact. That's what I would suggest as an individual. And then once again, I highly recommend making your employees apply that same principle to the work that they're doing. And the best leaders I've seen do this, they'll go to an employee like, hey, real quick, you did this, this, and this last week. This is what it meant for me as a leader, right? It meant that I could
Mhm.
take great numbers to our board. It meant that we could serve our customers better. It means that these particular people were impacted this way. And when you start talking in those sorts of terms, people allow themselves to kind of take those blinders off and look up a little bit. Okay, maybe my work does matter, because we all want to believe our work matters. And the truth is, it does. We
Yes.
just forget that. When we're inundated with the day-to-day minutia, right? All the tasks, the functions, the responsibilities of our work, we forget what doing great work means to all those that depend on us. And I like to help people remember.
You no pun intended, or not to sound cliche, but like the work you're doing is actually really valuable. And I think a lot of people are unaware of this and they forget that what they're doing is extremely important. I know I have fallen victim of that. And you kind of need a constant reminder, you know? You kind of want to change direction here a bit. With your book, could you give us some insights into some philosophies or beliefs or principles that you wrote about in that book?
Yeah, so my most recent book is called Purpose or Perish, and it's a neat book. It's a little bit different from my first book because I interviewed some fascinating people. Like I interviewed the founder of UGG Boots, or I interviewed the president of Club Med, and just to get their understanding of their stories, the origins of their organizations, and how they instill these certain types of cultures within those teams. But what I found to be one of the common threads is all of the greatest leaders that I interviewed in this book are helping every one of their team members form an emotional connection to their contribution.
Mm,
And when you're emotionally invested in the work that you're doing, you do better work. You
hmm.
complain less. Problems don't seem as big. And so I think therein lies one of the, I think the critical factors that a lot of people need to realize is that team members, they're starved for that emotional connection to their work. So they don't just show up and go through the motions. They care how they show up. They care how they produce, and they care how they serve everybody that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks for that insight. Back when I was studying psychology, at least hypnotherapy to be exact, the mind is kind of split up into two parts, right? We have the conscious mind on top, subconscious mind on the bottom. Subconscious mind makes up between like 88 to 95% of our total mind power, depending on who you ask, reside in the subconscious mind. So when we are emotionally charged behind the work that we do, we have over half, 88 to 95% of our mind invested into something. You said we complain less, the problems don't seem as big. One thing I want to add to that is we're actually solution seekers now. Now, opposed to asking our colleague for help, it's like, no, I care about this. I want to figure it out on my own because I care deeply about it now. So you have 2 books, you said.
I do. I do. The first one
What was the
called
other one? Yeah.
Enthusiastic You. And then the second one is Purpose or Perish. And to be honest, don't buy the first one. I'm a bit embarrassed by it now. It was good at the time, and it did become a bestseller thanks to my publisher, who was phenomenal. But the second book goes quite a bit deeper, and it's not nearly as surface level. And I think that that's what people are looking for more now is something a bit deeper. As we're talking about meaning and fulfillment, that doesn't happen in a shallow space, and we have to be willing to kind of dive into the deep end of the pool. So it's purely by accident. Now, I've always been a person that's like, hey, if we're at a conference or something like that, like, give me the microphone. I'll talk to the clients. I'm not shy at all about taking a microphone and saying hello to an audience, or talking about whatever products I was selling at the time. But I was in sales for over 10 years in the software industry and technology, and I loved it. I never had a bad day because it's just kind of my attitude. And I really enjoyed the work. And one day I'd gone into a client's office, and I took a technical salesperson with me because I'm not technical. I'm just a salesperson. I develop a relationship, find out if we have a solution, bring in a guy that can talk about the solution. So I was in this client's office, and they were talking about buying a single license of our software, which was probably 125,000 at the time. And we go into this conversation, have my technical guy with me, and I start building out this idea. So hold on, but don't we want access from all of your offices? And don't you want all of your team members in all 13 of your offices to be able to access this stuff? And we took this tiny little deal of one license, and they wanted to expand it to like 15 licenses, right? Which now it's a multi-million-dollar deal. And I'm grinning from ear to ear because I've already spent the check in my commission check in my mind. And we're walking out, and I'm just excited. I'm elated on cloud nine. And then my technical guy goes, why would you tell him we could do all that? I was like, hold on, can we do that? And he's like, we can, but it's a lot of work. And I was like, but that's why they pay us. And I got into an argument with this guy, like in the parking lot, like walking back to the car. I was like, how can you be so despondent? Like, get your stuff together, man. And so, finish my work day. I go home, and my wife was working late that night. So I'm sitting with my dog, having a scotch. And I was like, if people aren't passionate, if they aren't enthusiastic about their work, they need to go find different work. And I started like spouting off in dictation mode to my iPad. This is about 10 years ago. No, about 12 years ago now. I started spouting off just my internal thoughts about why people should be enthusiastic or go do something else, right? Like if you're going to complain about your work, go find different work. And that's kind of where it started. And so over the next 2 years, it just grew. And I had, you know, 80,000 words sitting on an iPad that I just vented to. And then by happen chance, I was introduced to a publisher from an old boss of mine. And she had this little tagline. She's like, oh, everybody has a story they haven't written yet. And I was like, that's funny. I've written it, but I haven't published it. She goes, I want to read your manuscript. I was like, all right. And that was this whole foray. And all of a sudden, she read the manuscript. We want to publish this. We're going to market it for you. And so when we decided to move forward with that, I gave my 2 weeks at the job I had at the time. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. I want to go and help people find passion in the work that they're doing, to find purpose, to find that meaning and fulfillment, because I think it's so important. And the funny thing is, it's only become more important, right? With the advent of AI and the uncertainty that that's bringing, the bigger factor is going to be the human component in that, because AI is going to be able to handle the efficiency, right? Productivity is the machine's edge, but I think the human's edge is going to be purpose behind the work that we're trying to accomplish. And so that's why it's amazing to be kind of at this crossroads where I started building up this thing, and there wasn't always a market for purpose and for enthusiasm in the workplace. But now all of a sudden it's become one of these leading charges that a lot of organizations realize is so important, because if you don't have impassioned team members, right, they're just filling a desk until they find a different job for more money. And I'm very opposed to the mercenary behavior that we've instilled as a society on all of our organizations and all of our employees. Because if you'll allow me another, okay, great, I love to rant. So if we go back like 50 years, right, people still had pensions, right? Right? It was golden handcuffs, stay with the company for 30 years, you get done, you get the gold watch, and you get your pension will pay you a portion of your salary for the rest of your life. Those went out of style, right? So all of a sudden, okay, no, instead, we're going to give you a 401k. Oh, and now we're going to do matching. And now we have a Roth 401k. And now we have a health savings account. And all of a sudden, we start adding these things on top. Now, here's the deal. People call those benefits. Those are not benefits. I would argue that those are bribes. They're bribes. That's all. You're bribing people to stay, right? And so the problem I have with that is you're creating mercenaries, right? Because when your competitor now comes to that employee and they have the same list of tasks and functions that we've agreed to, like your company goes, do these tasks, we'll give you this stack of money. And they go, okay, great. Now they're employed. When your competitor comes with the same list of tasks and a tiny bit taller stack of money, people go, okay. And then they quit and they go to the next job. Therein lies the problem. We are reinforcing that mercenary behavior in the workforce. And I think it's the wrong thing to do, because all of a sudden you're giving people the permission to not be emotionally invested. I'm not saying take away 401ks. I'm not saying take away the break rooms, but we need to realize that all the stuff we do, right? The free beer on Fridays, the foosball tables, the spray painted brick walls, those are not benefits or perks. Those are just bribes. We have to stop bribing people to be at our organizations. I think you should provide all of those things, but don't make that the reason that people want to be there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you feel like should be the reason?
Because they actually care about the outcome, because they care about the impact that they're making. And if you give yourself the freedom to kind of explore the real impact of the work that you're doing, you can find a reason to actually care. In any role, we already did it with a pizza delivery driver. Like, you can do it with somebody who's in a corporate sales position, right? Or a chief executive officer or a human resource. And if like, you're still doing meaningful work if you give yourself the permission to actually look at it from a different lens.
100%. No, I love that. Do you have any specific, I guess, like case studies or client examples of you working with an organization or a leader? You installed the frameworks into their business and workforce was happier, productivity went up, et cetera?
Absolutely. So, in fact, one of those case studies is in the book, my most recent book. But so there's a company that deals with radioactive waste remediation. All right. And so he's a brand new COO, called me up and we had a long conversation. You see, he had been a vice president of operations for a long time. The owner died unexpectedly. And so all of a sudden he was told, like, hey, you need to come over, take over operations, be the chief, the chief operations officer. This is what your role is going to be doing. He goes, okay. And he took on the role, but he didn't realize all of the problems that were going to follow him into that role, right? Because he had come up with all the same people. All of a sudden there's dissent among the ranks. People are arguing. There's all sorts of clamoring to try and grab whatever leftover leadership and position and power is available. And he was having this terrible struggle trying to get his leadership not only to report to him, right, and to be truthful with him, but to get buy-in on these new ideas, because he wanted to change how their entire organization ran. He wanted to really change the culture. He really wanted people to care, and he really wanted to improve the lives of all of his employees. But a lot of the seasoned people that had been there for a long time, the old guard, they weren't having it. So they would blatantly disagree with him in meetings. They would go against his mandates and what he has said as a leader. Like, don't listen to him. We'll just do it our way, the way we've been doing it. And the problem with that is all of a sudden things started falling apart. Clients were being served as well. They had less radioactive waste that they were taking in and being able to process. So all their numbers started looking bad at his first 6 months. It's because they were fighting him on the issue. He goes, Josh, why are they fighting me? So we took a deep dive into what was going on and kind of his mentality. Is like, well, how often do you get their buy-in? He's like, well, I'm the leader. They should just listen to what I say. It's like, I
Mm.
found your problem, John. He goes, what? I was like, well, your problem is that you're going in there telling them what to do, and they have no reason to believe that you know what you're talking about. If you were to go in and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I think the impact would be, what do y'all think of it? Get their buy-in. All of a sudden, when he would have these meetings with them, he would frame it in a way, he began framing it in a way where they would think it was their idea, but oh, you know what, we should start doing team building events, or we really should do some external training for our sales group, or we really should be doing these. And all of a sudden, they're now helping his idea, not just absorb it, but like coming up with additional ideas on how to change his culture, because now they're personally invested in this new process. And the cool thing is after we started working together, 1 year later, let's see, their revenue went up 114%. Their safety incidents went down 22%, which is a big deal in radioactive waste. And their retention was cut in half, right? So they were having, I think their attrition at the time was like 25 to 30%, but it was only 15% after we started working together because people saw the changes happening. The leadership is now on board and everybody was kind of pulling in the same direction to try and right this company that now had a new captain at the helm.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for that story. It's interesting because whenever you get opposed to taking a dictatorship or dictatorial standpoint as a leader, saying, "Here's my idea. Here's what we're gonna do." I don't feel like that works as well as the story that you just provided. When you can get everyone on board with an idea and say, how can we make this better? Or what are your thoughts on this? Now it feels like the entire group is invested emotionally, like you were saying. Now it's not the leader's decision, it's the group's decision, right? Because everyone voted on that. So absolutely love that. Josh, what are some things coming up for 2026, my friend? What are some things you're looking forward to this year?
No, we've got some really neat events set up for the year. I travel a lot, as I said, for work. I just started working on a new book where I'm taking the idea, this concept. If you've ever played a video game, you know the concept of side quests. And I think we know what side quests are, but in our daily life, we get kind of stuck in side quests too. And an example would be like the other day, I'm here working at my house. I work from my office if I'm not on the road. And then all of a sudden, my wife shows up from the garden center. And a side quest of mine is I have to go unload all of the gardening equipment, all the tools, all the new soil into our yard. Like that, it's a side quest, but it's worth the effort to help my wife. But we get stuck in other side quests too. The side quest of just sorting through emails, the side quest of going on social media, and these side quests detract us from our main quest. And I think too many people aren't looking at their main quest; they're looking at their side quest. And so I'm trying to take this new concept, kind of individual responsibility for our main quest, right? Whether it's in that job that you have now where you're trying to take your family, if you're whatever your larger goals are, and start kind of cutting out the side quests that aren't helping, right? Well, side quests can be very valuable, right? Whether it's if we're talking like in video game terms, in getting experience points, that also happens in the real world, or if we're getting new knowledge, right? That also happens in the real world. Those kind of side quests are great because they're contributing to how you can reach your main quest. But too often, and I'm guilty as anybody else, we get stuck on side quests that have no impact on our main quest, and it's just wasting our time.
Yeah, I am guilty of that as well, my friend. Oh, great point. Great point. I'm excited for that book. I think you're taking a different approach instead of working with organizations. It's more so at the individual level. I mean, obviously, this works for organizations and leaders, but I just like the concept behind the personal development side of things. So,
Yeah,
congratulations on that, my friend.
thank you.
If someone wanted to explore your work further, what's the first and best step that they can take?
Probably go to my website. So on my website, there's videos of me speaking. There's whole ideas. I got lots of blog posts and ideas. There's links to previous clients and the work we did and what they thought about it and what happened afterwards. So my website is joshuamevans.com, and there's a whole swath of information there that they can sort through and figure out. That would be where I would start. The second place would be find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff out there. It's really stuff I like to post, right? Like, oh, hey, this is a weird concept, or this is bothering me, or this kind of stuck in my craw, so I want to share it. Or like, here I am at this event this week, or can you guess what city I'm in from based on this picture? But those would be the best two places to start if you really wanted to see the breadth of my work.
Awesome. Josh, it was a pleasure having you. Thanks for
Thank you
joining us,
so much,
man.
Jordan.
Of course.